are now? Does it mean getting more things accomplished at work, achieving a higher level of quality in your work, or maybe getting things done faster so you can have more time for yourself? As different as these goals are, they share a common underlying truth. The time you have is a fixed commodity. There's the old adage, time is money, which we usually hear invoked in a business sense, like, we should be using this time to make more money than discussing this silly distraction. But the phrase time is money rings true in other ways too. Consider its common linguistic sense and how we talk about time. We spend it with loved ones, we save it by offloading tasks, we waste it in front of the television, or we invest time watching Pluralsight courses. These are all verbs we apply to money too. About the only difference between the two concepts is that while we can earn more money, we don't really have that option with time. Our coffers of time are fixed. During this webinar, I'll be presenting some pretty simple ideas. In fact, I'm leaving out any discussion of specific technologies or tools until absolutely necessary. The reason why? Most productivity tools or strategies aren't going to work for you unless you appreciate the discipline necessary to implement them. In other words, the problem you have managing your time has nothing to do with the tools you're using. The problem, honestly, is you and how you're choosing to spend your time. So in that light, let's talk about productivity as the idea that you're using your fixed coffers of time efficiently to achieve your goals, whatever those goals happen to be. In that sense, hacking your productivity is really just hacking how you organize and use your limited time resources, be it to get more things done, to get things done faster, or to improve the quality of your work. Hack 0. Consolidate your inboxes. Take a moment to think about where the draws on your time come from. That is, how do you determine what you're going to spend time doing from moment to moment? In a typical workplace, these tasks come from things like your email, texts, phone calls, or meeting notes. And let's say for our discussion that you lead a small team of developers, so you've also got operations dashboards, project and issue tracking systems, Kanban boards, etc. There's never a shortage of sources where you can find things on which to spend your time. In the realm of productivity systems, we call these sources inboxes. You really can't expect to get rid of these inboxes. You need to come to terms with the fact that, if anything, inboxes have a tendency to multiply. The best coping mechanism you can develop is a way to consolidate your existing inboxes and any future inbox that may join the ranks of your distractions. Many productivity systems, such as Get Things Done, recommend a simple process for consolidating inboxes that's very similar to what I'm about to describe. Whatever flavor of productivity system you prefer, the general idea is the same. Have one place to go, not 10 or 20, where you can see at a glance what needs your attention. We'll differentiate this one place from our other inboxes by calling it our to-do list. This to-do list should be simple to use and unobtrusive. In the past, I've used a personal Kanban board and even a hipster PDA, which is really just a stack of index cards and a pencil. These days, I prefer Trello for reasons I'll get to later. Right now, let's get back to talking about how we're going to treat our inboxes. The biggest change affected by any Get Things Done system is the way we interact with our individual inboxes. Instead of, say, leaving email open all the time, we're going to have a few specific times of the day when we actively process the inbox contents. We'll talk about what that means specifically in just a moment. For right now, just understand that the point is to invert the relationship you have with your inbox. So instead of leaving email open all the time, letting it dictate when it demands your attention, we only approach email or any other inbox when we're ready to deal with it. So, let's say we're ready to actively process an inbox. Well, what does that mean, actively process? The ultimate goal of active processing is to get the number of items in that inbox to 0. We want the inbox empty because once it's empty, we don't have to think about it anymore, and we can use our brains for more important things. Of course, the easiest solution would be to select all and delete all of our messages. Presto, inbox 0. But there might actually be important stuff in there, so that's not really an option. The only way we'll know for sure is to process each item in the inbox individually. This probably sounds tedious, but honestly it's not that hard. You see, right now, we're only trying to make a very simple determination for each item inside of the inbox. Do we deal with the thing now, or do we deal with the thing later? Making this choice doesn't require a lot of time. The trick is appreciating how long the item will take to complete. If we can deal with the task in 2 minutes or less, we'll just complete the task now and get it off our plate. You'll find that most things in your inboxes actually fall into this do it now category. If the answer is anything longer than 2 minutes, we'll queue the item in our to-do list for later. For example, that RSVP for the holiday party? Yeah, I'll just check my calendar and respond now. There, done. It's off my plate. Ah, that request for an update to the build dashboard? Well, that needs some coordination with other team members, so I guess I'll queue that one for later. Okay, marketing wants to know my availability for a meeting. Well, here's a link to my calendar so they can check for themselves. Done. Looks like the CTO wants to know if upgrading to the Java 8 platform will have any performance impact on our HTML. What? Yeah, I'm not really sure what he's asking for here, and I should probably follow up with him with some delicately thought out questions, so I'll queue that up. One important point to make here is that the easiest way you can deal with a task is to, well, not do it at all. I'm not saying stop doing your work, that's cheating. I'm suggesting that if it actually needs to get done, you should delegate the task if that makes sense. Or if the task is really just noise, say no, delete it, and move on with your life. That's not cheating. I mean, sure, it feels like cheating, but it really isn't. You're prioritizing your time, and delegation and relegation are parts of that. And for a lot of us, saying no is hard because we want to be helpful. But the guilt you feel from saying no will eventually fade into the calming warmth of burning a task from your inbox that you really didn't need to do in the first place. So that's active processing. We just iterate over every item in the inbox, repeating the quick determination, deal with it now or deal with it later. When we're done, we're left with a few things. First, an empty inbox. Second, a pile of completed tasks. And third, a list of more involved things that will demand our attention later. That's on the to-do list. Okay, one inbox down. So far, so good. Now we repeat the cycle for other inboxes we need to process. Just iterate the items, do the fast things, queue the ones that need more time. When we're done, we'll end up with first, a bunch of empty inboxes, second, a large pile of completed tasks, and third, a longer list of more involved things that demand our attention. And again, that's all on the to-do list. You might be asking, but Jim, we just traded 12 small inboxes for one big one. How does that help? And that's totally what you sound like, by the way. Well, that's a good question. It actually helps us in lots of ways. They're not all obvious, though. For starters, we've done all the easy things already. By just tackling those little tasks, we no longer need to think about them. They're gone from our universe, and that's more brain we have available for the important stuff. Moreover, all of those little inboxes are empty. We don't have to divide our attention among them because we know there's nothing in them. They're now irrelevant, well, at least long enough for us to focus on the hard stuff. And on a related vector, we now have one single place to focus our attention. And as you're about to see in the next 2 hacks, this is a really good thing. Hack 1. Schedule everything. I'm assuming you use some form of schedule for your day. If you're like most people, you look at that schedule as a sort of overlay on the time you want to spend doing the things that are important to you. That is, there are blocks of time marked off for the things that are actually secondary to your goals. These are meetings or appointments. And there's all this open space where you plan to do the stuff that's important to you, or as some of us call it, work. If this is the case for you, then some of the most disappointing moments of your day are when someone steals a bit of this open space away from you by putting a new event on your calendar. Like when that 3-hour block of continuous time that you plan to spend coding up a new feature becomes 2 1-hour sessions split by a sales call. Depending on how many people need your time and input, it may get so bad that you end up with something called calendar fragmentation, a phenomenon where your day ends up so full of meetings you're left with nothing but these crappy little 10 to 15 minute blocks of free time that aren't useful for accomplishing anything substantive. This isn't the way to get things done, at least not the things you want to do. So, how do you prevent calendar fragmentation? The answer to this is really the core secret of any productivity system. It's also dirt simple and remarkably counterintuitive. Are you ready? Okay, come closer. Here's the secret. If you want more time on your schedule, then just schedule more of your time. I know it sounds a bit like a fortune cookie fortune, but it's true. We've already covered how our time resources are fixed, right? We can't make more time. We can just use the time we have. So let's use it. Let's use all of it. The way we want to use all of it. Much like we invert our relationship with our inboxes to bring them under control, we need to invert our relationship with our calendar too. Instead of hoping for gaps of time between meetings, actively stake out those blocks of time for yourself before anyone else can. If that 3-hour block of contiguous time to write code is really important to you, let everyone know by blocking it off on your schedule. And you're probably thinking, but Jim, some of those calls and meetings are important. I can't just decline them because I want to. Yes, this is true, and I'm not suggesting you can or should ignore all the things that might be disruptive to your work life. Those things can actually be an important part of keeping a business alive. However, there's a strong and basic psychology that comes to bear when you block off a part of your calendar. Think about it. When you go to the movies, do you pick the seat right next to that stranger when there are so many open spaces available? When you're in the parking lot at work, do you wait for hours until the spot closest to the door opens up? Or do you find an empty space a little farther away that's available right now? In the same way, when you need to get on someone else's schedule, do you seek out the times that they're already busy, or do you immediately look for a time that's open for them? Moreover, by simply blocking off part of your calendar, you're preemptively giving your first refusal to having any interruptions during that time. If someone really needs your attention in that block of time, they can't just claim it. They need to reach out to you and ask you if you're available. Most of the time, it's just easier for them to fall into one of your available time slots. The real trick to using this technique is to maintain a balance on your calendar. You can't just claim your whole calendar and expect to never attend another meeting or call. Instead, keep a few honeypot times open. I like to block off swaths of time during the day and leave about 2 hours open in the afternoon. This works really well for me personally, since I'm a remote employee and my work hours are a few hours ahead of the home office. Those few hours in the afternoon invariably get consumed with last-minute meetings and calls, but that's okay. That's what those times are for. I'm isolating those interruptions to specific times of my day, when they make the most sense for me to manage them. Your mileage may vary with this technique, but I recommend offering a few honeypot times in the morning and afternoons across the work week that can act as little gravity wells for these random wayward meetings. If you want to try a more forceful tactic to isolate scheduled interruptions, you can do office hours a few times a week as a way to funnel incidentals and random inquiries to specific times. Remember how we processed each item in our inbox? We decided whether the item could be done easily, in which case we just do it now, or whether the item would require more effort and thought, in which case we put the item into our master to-do list and come back to it. One easy way to defer an interruption is simply saying, hey, this is too important to discuss while I'm distracted with this other task. Let's talk about it during my next office hours. Not only does this quickly isolate the interruption from you, but it also leverages more basic human psychology by making the interrupter feel valued and important. That is, you end up saying, hey, you're important enough to me that I want to make sure I can give you the undivided attention you deserve. Which sounds way better than, hey, go away, I'm busy right now. At this point, I could summarize with some overused metaphor about making sure you get the rocks in the jar before it's filled with sand or something, but I think a little brutal honesty plays much better in this case. The takeaway here is really simple. If you don't schedule your time, someone else will. Hack 2, do the thing. The doing is the thing. The talking and worrying and thinking is not the thing. So says Amy Poehler in her book, Yes, Please. Everything up to this point has been preparation. Hack 0 was all about knowing what things need your attention by putting them on a master to-do list. Hack 1 is all about organizing your time so you can focus your attention on the to-do list. So now we have a to-do list and time to do it, so it's time to start to doing the things on the list. So here's where the rubber meets the road, folks. Well, Almost. There's something you need to do first, and that's isolate yourself with your to-do list. That is, you need to kill off anything that would serve to distract you away from that to-do list and its contents. This includes closing the obvious attention-sucking black holes like Facebook or Netflix, but also any of your individual inboxes too, like your email or your phone. Part of the reason we ransacked each inbox and consolidated the heavy stuff into one big list was really just so we could ignore those inboxes during these times of to-doing. Having less to think about means we can focus more on fewer things. This strategy is really ubiquitous among Get Things Done systems, and the reason why is pretty simple. It's backed by psychological research. You've probably heard that multitasking is a myth, and that it isn't something your brain can actually do. There's actually an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that your productivity and the quality of your work both suffer when you have to divide your attention or switch between activities, even if the activities are similar to one another. Trying to multitask might make you feel like you're getting a lot done, but that feeling of accomplishment is more than likely just you misinterpreting the mental exhaustion caused by constantly switching between tasks. So the first rule of doing the to-dos: no multitasking. We're going to do one thing and only one thing, and we're going to give it all of our attention and effort until it's completed. Anything that isn't that one thing we're doing gets closed, muted, turned off, put in the yard, shipped overseas, or launched into space as appropriate. Okay, everything's off and put away except the to-do list, and now we're ready to do the things. At this point, you really have some choices to make. There are a ton of tried and true methodologies for dealing with your task list efficiently, like Seinfeld's Secret or Pomodoro. They each have their quirks and their perks, and what will work for you will honestly depend on your own personal faults, so you have to be honest with yourself here. For instance, in my case, I know that my mind tends to wander like mercury on hot asphalt, so I find Pomodoro especially useful to keep me on the rails while I'm actually doing my to-dos. The nice thing about most of these time management tactics is that they're easy and simple to execute. You don't need to make a massive investment in software or equipment or management buy-in to get them running. Instead of describing a myriad of techniques to you, I'll let you research them on your own and make your own choices. Here in this webinar, I'll lay out my own personal system that's a simplification of the Pomodoro technique, and describe how I use this system to compensate for my own personal shortcomings. The reason I latch onto the Pomodoro technique is that it focuses on short cycles of work with regular self-checks. The workflow's pretty simple. First, identify a thing you want to accomplish, something that takes about 20 minutes. Next, set a timer for 20 minutes. Then, go heads down on the thing until the timer goes off. Try to remain laser focused on that task for the whole 20 minutes. Once the timer goes off, stop working and check your progress on the task. At this point, determine if you wandered off target, and if you did wander, why. After this self-reflection, take a short break. Set the timer for 5 minutes or so. This is time for Facebook, or to check on the state of that eBay bid, or whatever. It's your time. Use it as you need to. I'm not going to judge you. When the break's over, the timer will go off, reevaluate your goal, and repeat steps 1 through 5. I can hear what you're thinking. So basically, Jim, your system is working for 20 minutes? I don't see the point. Why not work for 40 minutes, or until you just get the thing done? Well, that's a good point, and my answer is simple. I choose 20 minutes because I know my own faults. One of my secret superpowers is letting my mind wander like a caffeinated squirrel. I might start out evaluating a course proposal on, say, Kotlin, which leads me to look into the technology and its documentation, some part of which reminds me about how I need to finish coding up the automation script for labeling auditions. So let's just open that code project now so I remember to do that today. But first I should pull the latest code from GitHub in case Alyssa made some changes, which, yep, looks like she did. So I should merge. And crap, I forgot to commit my own local changes. I'm not sure if I was actually finished with them or not. So, okay, well, let's take a closer look at my changes and see if I want to keep them, or maybe I could revert them and just start over. And right about then, the timer goes off, and I realize I'm way off course from where I wanted to be. I'm supposed to be processing a proposal on Kotlin, but instead, I ended up looking at some Node.js code. So that 20-minute cycle pairs well with my failings as a person. It gives me a reliable way to check on myself periodically, make sure I'm working on the things that I want to get done. If I get off task, the most time I'll end up wasting is 20 minutes. Without that timer to remind me to check in on myself, I'd end up so far down the rabbit hole I may never come out. It's becoming a common theme in this webinar, but there's more psychology in this. Knowing that a timer is ticking off seconds somehow helps me focus, and I tend to get a lot of to-dos done in a relatively short amount of time. In all truthiness, most days I only get in 5 or so of these cycles between meetings and calls, but even that small number is enough to wear me out. After 2 or 3 cycles, I like to take a longer break and move around, maybe check some of my inboxes to see if I can move stuff to the master to-do list again, before I crack down on the next task. If my little system sounds simple, it's because it is simple. I need it to be simple. Simple enough that I'll actually use it. In reality, the single hardest part of the system is remembering to use it. It's really easy just to not set the timer and try and bash some stuff out. But whenever I do this, more often than not, I end up mentally wandering into something cognitively shiny, and I'm less productive than I want or need to be. If my little system sounds effective, it's because it is effective. It's not about time tracking or obtrusive pieces of software that actually suck your attention away from your work. It's just a timer and a list of things to do and a little discipline. Really, those 2 things are the most important to consider when evaluating any productivity system. Will you actually use it? And will it stay out of your way? Hack 3. Retrospect, adapt, and automate. The timer that I use during my adapted Pomodoro technique forces me to periodically verify that I'm doing the to-do that I need to be to-doing. In a similar fashion, it's important to periodically look at the productivity system on a whole and make sure it's meeting your needs. One thing you may have noticed is that I have avoided talking about specific technologies and tools in this webinar, up until now at least. I wanted to keep the conversation general because the tactics and strategies I've been discussing apply to a variety of scenarios, from digital Kanban boards to pen and paper lists. However, during this time of retrospection, it's important to consider the specific tools and technologies that make up your productivity system and whether or not they're really working well with you. There are a few questions I regularly revisit with regards to how I'm accomplishing tasks. I'll lay them out for you here and offer some examples of how I've adjusted my specific tooling to become more productive at Pluralsight. The first question I like to ask is, what have I dropped recently? That is, are there any tasks that I've just failed to complete on time, and why did that happen? This is usually a matter of prioritization. There's never a shortage of things to do at Pluralsight, and some things just take precedence over others. Unfortunately, tasks with less precedence still need to get done. One strategy I've employed recently is to schedule blocks of time for specific types of tasks. In the past, I would just rifle through my master to-do list, knocking out tasks based on their priority. The unfortunate side effect of this approach is that things that are low priority on the list tend to wait. The master to-do list is organic, and high-priority tasks float in pretty regularly. If things at work hit the fan on a routine basis, those low-priority tasks will sit in the master to-do list indefinitely. To make sure these less-than-top priority tasks get some regular attention, I've started scheduling small blocks of time just for them. This ensures that my work doesn't fall victim to the tyranny of the urgent. The next question I ask myself, are there any inboxes that are occupying an inordinate amount of my time? In other words, do I spend more time trying to clear out one of my inboxes over the others? If so, how can I make the culling of this inbox faster? Invariably, some inboxes tend to fill up faster than others. For me personally, it's email that stacks up the fastest. Second would probably be direct messages on our corporate Slack messaging platform. Dealing with the volume of tasks coming in from these 2 places has pushed me to some creative problem solving and automation. Remember, the first decision for any task in any inbox is do it now or do it later. These later tasks get queued up in my master to-do list. By the way, I use Trello to manage this master to-do list. If you're not familiar, Trello is an online Kanban board service. I like it for a variety of reasons, but mostly because it's dirt simple and it's effective and it's fast. That said, it can be really cumbersome to create a card in Trello and transfer the data from someplace else, like an email or Slack message. I'd rather just throw the email onto a Trello card and move on to the next item in the inbox. Thankfully, that's entirely possible. One of my favorite aspects of Trello is that it supports an application programming interface, or an API. This allows my interaction with the service from code. In addition, Slack offers an API, and so does my email client. This means that it's possible to programmatically, say, slurp an email from my inbox onto a new Trello card with no effort on my part. And that's really my goal. Once I know I'm not dealing with a task right now, I just want to shuttle it to my to-do list quickly and then move on to the next thing. What's that? But Jim, I don't know how to write code, and I don't have time to learn. Okay, I don't buy it, but okay, I'll believe you. It's alright, you don't really need to know how to write code. There are tons of online services that only exist to help you automate other online services. Products like Zapier, FlowXO, or If This Then That, or If as I like to call it, offer simple and UI-based workflow creators that can accomplish this automation for you. For example, you can configure Zapier to periodically copy any email labeled To Do onto a specific Trello board. It saves you tons of time and monkey work, and best of all, it just works. I said at the outset of all this that time is a fixed resource, so you know I appreciate your time. If you've gotten one thing from this webinar, I hope it's the idea that your productivity isn't a question of tooling. It's about doing as little extra effort as possible to use your time effectively. If you've got two things from this webinar, I hope the second is that you appreciate what a terrible person you are, at least when it comes to paying attention to things, and that's okay, because so is everyone else. The difference between people who seem productive and those that don't is that the former group understands this and they compensate for it. So, one last little gem to take with you. One of my go-to authors, Hunter S. Thompson, once said the following: "Anything worth doing is worth doing right," which often gets bastardized into something like, if it's worth doing well. As much as I agree with the sentiment, I think this statement misses the real target. In my mind, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing, period. The trick is making that happen. Thanks for watching. This has been Jim Christopher from Pluralsight.